Hello, welcome back to News of Asha. Today is August 17th, 2023. Let's see what's happening in the world today. More than 60 people are feared dead after a boat carrying migrants was found off Cape Verde in West Africa. 38 people, including children, were rescued with footage showing them being helped ashore, some on stretchers on the island of Sal. Almost all those on board the boat, which was at sea for over a month, are thought to have been from Senegal. Cape Verde officials have called for global action on migration to help prevent further loss of life. The ministry said it was liaising with authorities in Cape Verde to arrange the repatriation of Senegalese nationals. The passengers' other countries of origin reportedly include Sierra Leone and, in one case, Guinea-Bissau. Jose Moreira, a health official on Sal, said the survivors were improving and were being looked after, with a focus on rehydration and tests for conditions like malaria. As ever with irregular migration, exact figures are hard to come by, but between 2020 and 2023, at least 67,000 people arrived in the Canary Islands. Over the same period, just over 2,500 people have lost their lives. Given the irregular, secretive nature of the route, the true figures could be much higher. Much of West Africa is increasingly unstable, with coups and Islamist insurgencies making an already difficult situation worse. In Senegal, opposition politicians have been imprisoned, with claims of violent crackdowns by the authorities. President Macky Sall recently announced he would not seek a third term in office, but tensions remain high. Let's hope the world and the UN will pay more attention to these problems and hopefully help resolve it in a more peaceful manner. Argentina's leading presidential candidate vows to shut down thieving central bank. After sending local capital markets into a tailspin and triggering a currency devaluation with his shock win in Sunday's country's presidential primaries, Argentina's leading presidential candidate Javier Milei, a self-described anarcho-capitalist, added to the shock factor on Wednesday when he pledged to close the nation's central bank while saying he would make every effort to avoid a default on the country's sovereign debt if he wins the October vote. His plan includes slashing spending by at least 13% of GDP before mid-2025 by dramatically downsizing public works, reducing the number of ministries, removing subsidies and capital restrictions that would allow businesses to transact in the US dollar. More drastically, he plans to shutter the central bank, which he said has no reason to exist, and dollarize the $640 billion economy. I will make every effort to avoid a default, obviously, Milei said in a 2-hour-long interview in Buenos Aires Wednesday. If you do fiscal adjustments that's needed, the financing will be there. Milei said, central banks are divided in 4 categories: the bad ones like the Federal Reserve, the very bad ones like the ones in Latin America, the horribly bad ones, and the Central Bank of Argentina. I find it very hard to disagree with this opinion of Milei's. Manuel Garcia Gojon writes at the Mises Institute that Milei's full plan, which he laid out in some detail in August 2nd, is nothing if not pragmatic from an anarchist point of view. The first measure consists of an organizational reform of the government, going from 18 to 8 ministries. The second measure consists of a significant reduction in public spending. The third measure consists of flexibilization of labor regulations. The fourth measure consists of liberalization of trade. The fifth measure consists of monetary reform. The sixth measure consists of an energy reform. The seventh measure consists of fostering investment. The eighth measure consists of an agrarian reform. The ninth measure consists of a judicial reform. The 10th measure consists of a welfare reform. The 11th measure consists of an educational reform. The 12th measure consists of a health reform. And the 13th measure consists of a security reform. Among chief concerns for market is that Milei, a political outsider, wouldn't be able to get backing for his plans. The 52-year-old, who doesn't shy away from criticizing politicians he says have been robbing Argentines for decades, said he would call referendums if he can't get legislative consensus to approve his measures. I, for one, am in complete support of Milei's actions, and hopefully he manages to win in his elections and actually bring Argentina out of their massive inflation problems and their massive economic problems. And if Milei manages to pull this off, it will be a sign to many other countries and many of the nations out there, especially the people in the ground roots, that change is possible with a leader that is strong and willing to go against the political establishments that have been ruling over most of the people for such a long time that they have lost touch with the daily man and the average man on the street. Please like, share and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Thank you. Islands fishermen fear species migration as sea temperatures soar. Soaring temperatures in the North Atlantic Ocean over the summer months have raised fears that fish could be pushed to colder waters, heaping pressure on the already struggling industry. At the end of July, the US National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA) announced that average surface temperature in the North Atlantic has reached a new record high of 24.9 degrees Celsius. The Atlantic Challenge, like many vessels sailing out of killibags, catches blue whitings and mackerels, which are highly prized on international markets, returning to port 1 or 2 days after a catch so produced is fresh. He feared it was only a matter of time before so-called pelagic fish such as mackerel, blue whiting and herring move north permanently. If we continue with the warming of the waters, it is inevitable the pelagic species will move totally out of the waters and we could end up that we have very little fish, he said. In June, the NOAA recorded what it characterized as a Category 4 or extreme marine heat wave off the coast of Ireland and the United Kingdom. Glenn Nolan, who heads Oceanographic and Climate Services at Ireland Marine Institute, said the month saw significant temperatures, 4 degrees to 5 degrees in excess of what would be normal of the country's coast in the summer months. Nolan said the extreme temperatures could create the conditions for changes to fish migration and pointed to algal blooms in warm waters causing problems typically for shellfish and finfish. Looks like the heating up of the waters in the northern hemisphere seems to be having drastic effects on fishes, and this might also add to the inflation problems we have facing the food supply around the world, considering the price of rice has also gone up due to the export bans in India. Let's hope that we can find a solution for this problem soon in order to help maintain the food supply and the food chains around the world. Mars is rotating more quickly, NASA missions finds. Mars is rotating more quickly than it used to, according to data that NASA's InSight lander collected on the Red Planet. The now retired InSight was armed with a suite of instruments including antenna and radio transponder called RISE, or the Rotation and Interior Structure Experiment. The instruments were used to track Mars rotation during the mission's first 900 days on the planet. Astronomers determined that the planet's spin is increasing by about 4 milliarc-seconds per year, or shortening the length of the Martian day by a fraction of a millisecond per year. A Martian day lasts about 40 minutes longer than a day on Earth. The increased acceleration seems incredibly small, and researchers aren't quite sure what is causing it. However, they suggest it might be due to ice accumulation at the Martian poles, or the rise of land masses after being covered in ice. When a planet's mass shifts in this way, it can cause the planet's spin to accelerate. Initially, the InSight mission, the first to study the interior of Mars, was supposed to last about 2 years after it landed in November 2018, but NASA extended the mission for another 2 years. The InSight mission continued to collect data about Mars until the very end, falling silent in December 2022 after dust blocked its solar panels from receiving sunlight. Previous research made possible by the mission's unique detection of the planet's interior confirmed that Mars has a molten core. Researchers then used RISE to measure the wobble of Mars as the core sloshed around inside. "It's really cool to be able to get these latest measurements and so precisely," said Bruce Bernard, who served as InSight's principal investigator before retiring on August 1st. In a statement, he worked at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California for 46 years. "I've been involved in efforts to get geophysical stations like InSight onto Mars for a long time, and results like this make all those decades of work worth it." Invasive yellow-legged hornet spotted in US for the first time. A new invasive species has been spotted in the US for the first time. A living yellow-legged hornet, also known as the Asian hornet, was detected in Georgia, which state officials say could cause damage to its agricultural industry if left uncontrolled. The Georgia Department of Agriculture said Tuesday the discovery has the potential to threaten honey production and native pollinators. Earlier this month, a Georgian beekeeper discovered and reported the insect to the state. The yellow-legged hornet's identity was then confirmed by the US Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. The next steps for officials will be to set up traps to find out if there are more of this pest in the area. If they are able to find a colony, it will be destroyed, Georgia agricultural officials said. The hornets that has already been identified will be DNA tested so that scientists can determine whether the insect originated from Europe or Asia. The yellow-legged hornet, which is identified as a social warp species, is native to tropical and subtropical areas of Southeast Asia and is also established in much of Europe, parts of Middle East and parts of Asia, where it is not native. The insect builds egg-shaped nests often in trees and can host up to 6,000 worker hornets. The reason invasive species are dangerous is because when the invasive species enters a new environment, there is a very high chance that they do not have predators that is able to target them. Therefore, they will be able to grow in population uncontrollably, therefore devastating the environment. In their native environments, an ecosystem of balance has already been developed for thousands of years, whereby each species will have its own predator and prey. Therefore, the balance of the species will be kept in check. When the species goes to places where they do not have their predators, then they are allowed to freely expand their colonies, which then can cause major problems. Exclusive: China State Bank sees selling dollars for yuan in London and New York hours. Shanghai: China's major state-owned banks were seen busy selling US dollars to buy yuan in both onshore and offshore spot foreign exchange markets this week, people with direct knowledge of the matter said, in an attempt to slow the yuan's depreciation. Though they also trade on their own behalf or to execute clients' orders, state banks often act at the behest of the central bank when the yuan is under pressure, and it is now. State bank dollar selling has become a new normal to slow the pace of yuan depreciation, said one Shanghai-based trader. Such dollar selling could limit falls in the offshore yuan and prevent it from diverging too far from its onshore counterpart. The yuan has lost about 2.4% against the dollar since this month, and 6% since the start of the year. The onshore yuan traded at 7.3145 per dollar as of 4:42 GMT, while the offshore yuan last fetched 7.34. The government's slow delivery of stimulus measures to bolster growth has disappointed investors. Meantime, the PBOC has eased monetary policy to support the economy, though the price paid for lowering interest rates is more pressure on the yuan. Similar tactics were seen in September 2022 when the PBOC also asked major state-owned banks to be prepared to sell dollars for yuan in offshore markets as it tried to stem the yuan's fall. Hong Kong's overnight yuan borrowing cost jumped to the highest level since April 2022 on Wednesday, with the CNH Hong Kong Interbank Offered Rate Benchmark (CNH HIBOR) rising across the board. The liquidity squeeze was not very drastic, as aggressively mopping up yuan liquidity from that market could adversely affect bond market sentiment, one banker noted. When dealing with the yuan, there are two types of yuan that most people tend to talk about: the onshore yuan and the offshore yuan. The difference is the onshore yuan are the yuan that is traded within the country, and the offshore yuan is the yuan that is freely traded with the rest of the world. How China seems to balance out the yuan is by managing the onshore to offshore rate of money transfers and flows. That way, they can limit the amount of offshore yuan that is being traded on the open market versus their onshore yuan. Indian central banks likely sold dollars to keep rupee from record low, traders. Mumbai: The Reserve Bank of India likely sold dollars via public sector banks to ensure the rupee did not fall to a record low, 6 traders told Reuters. The rupee was quoted at 83.0250 to the US dollar, down about 0.1% from the previous session on the interbank order matching system, before the normal OTC opening time of 9 a.m. The rupee had dropped to 83.16. The RBI likely sold dollars to pull the rupee back near the 83 level. The RBI wants to prevent volatility and one-sided moves in the rupee, said Ritesh Busari, Deputy General Manager for Treasury at private sector lender South Indian Bank. With the RBI intervening in the forex market, we think that it will be difficult for the rupee to depreciate below 83.25. The rupee's record low of 83.29 reached in October last year was the lowest it's reached in a while. Looks like India is also following China's footsteps by selling US dollars to prop up the Indian rupee. This seems to be something that is happening all around the world, and the main reason this is happening is simply because the US dollar has been appreciating due to the fact that the Federal Reserve has been increasing interest rates. Ripple Labs bites back against SEC's request to file appeal. Ripple's chief legal officer says there's no extraordinary circumstance that warrants the Security and Exchange Commission being able to appeal its partial loss while the case is still pending. Ripple Labs has voiced its opposition to the United States security regulators' move towards an interlocutory appeal relating to the summary judgment laid down by the U.S. District Court Judge Annalisa Torres on July 13th. In an August 16 letter to Torres of the Southern District of New York, Ripple's lawyers explained that because the SEC failed to satisfy elements of the Howey test relating to Ripple's distribution, a legal question, the court should reject the SEC's motion for leave to file an interlocutory appeal. An interlocutory appeal occurs when a ruling by a trial court is appealed while other aspects of the case are still proceeding and are only allowed under specific circumstances. Ripple's lawyers put forth arguments in opposition against the SEC's request. They argued that an appeal requires a pure question of law and that the SEC's request raises no new legal issues that need to be reviewed. On July 13, Ripple scored a partial victory over the securities regulator regarding the security status of XRP. Torres ruled that the XRP token was not in itself a security. She said, however, the sales of XRP tokens can be securities in certain circumstances, such as when sold to institutional investors, but not when sold on exchanges to retail traders. Thank you. I hope to see you again tomorrow.